Okay, in this video we're going to start to talk about repetition and what that means. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to write many programs where something occurs one time and that's it. Now, that's not to say it couldn't, okay? There may be those things where you process something one time and you're done and it's over. But there's also those times where you're going to have certain tasks that are repetitive, and it's a matter of presenting the code that will allow you to allow those tasks to repeat or to be done over and over again. Now, in Python, as in other languages, there are really two types of loops that we can work with. One of those is condition controlled, and one of those is count controlled. And that's a pretty general term that you'll find. Now, what does that mean? Well, a condition controlled loop uses a true false, similar like what an if does, to find out how many times the loop should repeat itself. I kind of look at it like this. If you are climbing a mountain, and the way a while would work is you can go so far and then stop and take a break. And then you can go so far and you can stop and you can take a break. See, you can control how long this task occurs because you look at some kind of condition being a true or a false. That's in contrast to a count controlled. A count controlled repeats a specified number of times. So we use something to say you're going to do this 10 times and that's it, or 30 times and that's it. But you are relegated to doing it that many times for a count controlled. In programming, our condition controlled is the while loop. Okay? Our count controlled is the for loop. Now, in this video, we're going to go through talking about what a while loop is, kind of how it works, and what we can do with that. So, this here is a very simple program, and what we're going to basically do here is we are going to calculate somebody's commission rate. And we're going to continually do this until we decide that we no longer want to continue doing this. Okay? So what we have here, we set up a variable called keep going. Again, that's just one that I come up with. It can be anything you want. It's just a matter of you setting it up. And I set that equal to a lowercase y. Okay? Now, this is important to set because in order for this while loop to start, this condition has to be true. Because unless this condition is true, none of these things inside of my while are going to happen. So think of this as being your while loop initiator. Okay? You want to think of it that way. So what happens is we say, okay, while keep going is equal to a lowercase y. Now, let's take a pause for a second. How does the computer know that this is a y and not like an uppercase y or a lowercase y or something like that? Well, that's where we start talking about ASCII. Because what happens is when you use Python, and really any language, they convert this letter into an ASCII value. Okay? So what's that mean? Well, let's take a look. If I want to see what a letter's representation is in ASCII, I can use the ORD function and put in like the lowercase y. Okay? So you see that comes back as the decimal value 121. So what happens is when Python does its comparison to say, does y equal y, it converts y into a decimal value and then compares them. Now, this is different than a capital Y. Okay? A capital Y is 89. So a capital Y does not equal a lowercase y. Now, if you want, you can go out and get a list of all these ASCII values. The website is ASCIItable.com. Okay, so it's www.asciitable.com. Okay, you can go to that website, and this will show you a list of all the characters, both symbols, uppercase, lowercase, numerical, as well as some of those like null characters and things that we can't typically see. All right? But this is important to understand when you start doing comparisons for strings. Even with numerals, they do the same thing. They convert them to a decimal value and figure out if they're equal or not. Okay? And then eventually gets converted into binary ones and zeros, so on and so forth. Okay? But we are looking at this while. All right? So we're basically saying while keep going is equal to y. So right now when it first comes in, keep going is equal to y, we set that. All right? Then what we do is we're going to drop in and look at what we're going to do. Now, just like with the if, okay, we have our while, we have our colon, and then we have our indentation. Again, you only have to indent at least one space, but you have to indent. That way we know what all falls inside of that loop. What tasks or what instructions, what procedures are we going to do over and over and over and over and over again? So in this case, we're going to prompt the user to enter their sales for the month. We're going to convert that to a float and save that as sales value. We're then going to prompt the user for their commission rate. Again, we're going to store that convert that to a float, and then we're going to store that as commission rate. We're going to calculate their commission earned on the sales by taking their sales times their commission rate. Then we're going to print out what their commission rate is. Again, we've put some formatting in because I want to have commas where necessary. So if they made like $1,000, it says 1,000. And I also want to have it out to 2 floating points. So I want 2 decimal places. And then I put SEP in there because I want to make sure that my commission rate is butted right up against my $sign. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prompt the user if they'd like to continue. Because what happens then is this comes up. If they type a lowercase y, then keep going is still equal to y, and this process starts all over. Now, if they type anything other than a lowercase y, so a capital Y, the letter N, whatever, the loop terminates and the program's over. All right, so let's take a look. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to go ahead and type this program in, and then we'll go ahead and execute it and see what happens. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to go to File, and you can go to File and save it. I'm just going to go to Run and Run Module. And of course, I got to save it, so I'm going to call this, let's go back here. I need to go to my Python folder where I have my code. And I'm going to call this one commission program.py. So I'm just going to save this, and it's going to run. All right, so here we go. So enter the amount of sales for the month. So I'm going to say that I sold $25,000 worth of merchandise. And my commission rate, I get a fairly conservative commission rate. I get 5%. So I'm going to put in 0.05 for a 5% commission. That tells me that I was able to earn $1,250 for the month for my commission on my sales. It's not too shabby. Notice here it says now, would you like to continue? Well, if I put in a lowercase y, it starts all over. So I can calculate again. So let's say the following month I have a very a smaller amount of sales, so 10,000, and I use my commission rate of 5%. Again, it tells me there's my commission rate, and then would you like to continue? Well, I'm going to put in an N, and the program's over. Okay. Now the thing is, yes, I did type an N there, but I could have typed anything other than a lowercase y, and the program would have terminated. Okay, that's the important thing to understand. Okay, I could have typed anything other than a lowercase y, and I would have been program terminated. Okay, so this program here kind of gives you an introduction to a while. Okay, now another program that we could do is a budget analysis tool. Okay, this program here, it uses a while, but it also uses an if. So it kind of brings together some things that we've done in the past, along with doing some stuff with a while. So I'm going to go ahead and run through this program, and then I'll give you the opportunity to type it in, because it does go down the page a little bit. So I'll have to scroll through here in a minute. But up here at the type, I've created some variables. And this variable here is what's going to be my while loop initializer. Okay, and we'll talk about that. So the purpose of this program is to prompt the user to enter in their budget for the month. And then they're going to enter in all of their expenses for the month. Now, I don't know how many expenses they're going to have. They may have 2, they may have 200. That's why we're using a while, because we're going to let this be condition-based, essentially saying, you know what, when they have no more expenses, that's when we'll stop, okay? Because I don't know, they may have 2 or 100, okay? So their budget, we're going to initialize to 0. The difference is going to be 0. Now, why do we have difference? Well, part of the program is going to evaluate if they are over budget, under budget, or if they've been exactly on budget. And then we want to keep track of their total expenses. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute here. Go ahead and type in the code you see. I'm going to go ahead and give you a second. So feel free to pause the video at this time, and you can type in the code you see. Okay, once you have that typed in, you can type in the remainder of the code that you see. All right, so let's talk about it. So now that we got it all typed in, we're going to prompt the user for their budget for the month, how much money they've set aside for the month. We're going to prompt the user to get that, convert it to a float, and then save that as budget. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get onto our loop. While spent is not equal to 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user to enter in their expenses. And the trigger is when they are finished, they're going to enter in a 0, and that will quit the loop. That'll terminate the loop. Okay? So it's a very short while loop. There's not a lot here. So while spent is not equal to 0. That's why up here we have spent equal to 1.0. You could have set that to anything so long as it was something other than 0. Okay? And that makes this true. So it comes in, it's going to prompt the user for the amount they spent, and they're going to enter that in. It's going to convert to a float, okay, save it as spent, and then it's going to increment the total. Now this is the same as doing total equals total plus spent, okay? This is just a shortcut way of writing this, which is perfectly legal. You can do plus equal, minus equal, divide equal, you know, all of those you can do and make your life a little bit simpler as you go through some of these to do accumulation. Okay? So, We're going to prompt the user. They're going to enter in their amount. It's going to convert to a float. It's going to save it as this variable. And then we're going to do a running total of our expenses. Once completed, once the loop is terminated, so they hit 0 and hit enter, this then is no longer true because spent does equal 0, and it goes down to this print. So it's going to print their budgeted amount. Again, we've done some formatting. We put in their spent amount. Again, we did some formatting. The only thing I would do is I would add in commas there. Okay? And then we come through and evaluate with our ifs now. If our budget is greater than the total spent, we're going to find out what the difference is because we want to tell them how much under budget they are. And that's what it's going to do. It's going to say you are X number of dollars under budget. Well done. We have an else if. Their budget is less than their total. Well, again, we need to find out what that difference is and tell them they are a certain amount of money over budget. If they spend the same amount, that's where this else comes in. So if their budget is equal to their total, then it says spending matches budget. Okay? So that's what this program is going to do. It's going to run through, and again, the reason why we chose the while is because we don't know how many expenses they're going to have. They may have 2, they may have 200. We don't know. We're going to leave it in the hands of the user to keep entering their expenses, and then once this condition is no longer true, we'll end it, and then we'll do all these things down here. Again, keep an eye on your indentation, as it can cause you grief. All right? So I'm going to make a couple changes. I want to just add a comma here and a comma here. Again, I put those commas in just because if I have 1,000 or 10,000, I want to be able to see the separation. So I'm going to run this. Got to save it, so make sure you save your code. I already saved mine, so I was going to resave it. And here we go. All right, so enter the amount budgeted for the month. So I'm going to say I budgeted $1,500. Okay, so how much did you spend? I spent $50. I spent $20. I spent $75. I spent $100. I spent $250. And I spent $15. Okay, so those are the expenses that I spent this month. Now, you notice it keeps going until I type a 0. Okay? As soon as I hit 0, it finishes up. So you can see that I budgeted $1,500. I spent $510, and it says I'm $990 under budget. Now what I did is I went through the loop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, technically 7, before it finished. So let's run this again, just to show you that I don't have to adhere to that. So I'm going to do 1,500 again. And I'm just going to do 23, 45, 21, and 6, okay? Much less this time. Now, the last time I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This time I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? And it still went through and did the calculations as appropriate, okay? The idea behind the behind the while is it's very, very condition-based. It makes sure that we evaluate some condition, right? In this case, while spent is not equal to 0. As long as that is not equal to 0, as long as that is true, then we know we will continue going through here. As soon as that becomes false, the loop terminates and we move on. That is similar to what we did over here earlier. In this case, we looked for keep going to be equal to y. As long as it was equal to a lowercase y, this program kept going. But as soon as we put something other than y, as soon as it's something other than y, capital Y or anything else, the loop terminates, the program's over. Okay? Biggest things to watch for, make sure you have something that can initialize your loop, right? Something that's going to make this condition true the very first time so that the loop actually starts. And then make sure you give yourself a way out, okay? You don't want to fall victim to the nasty infinite loop where the loop goes on and on and on and on and on forever and ever and ever because there's no way to ever make this condition false. This is our out for this program. Just like in the other program, this is our way out, right? We make spent equal to 0. When we make spent equal to 0, that terminates the loop, and then we pass down through. Okay? So that is our trip down the while tree, or that's our trip down the while avenue if you want. Okay? If you have questions, as always, feel free to ask. You have my contact information. Otherwise, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, good evening.